Anaya Sharma was the radiant Indian bride. Ethan Miller, the proud Australian groom who adored her. Richard Miller, his charismatic father hiding a dangerous secret. And Margaret Miller, the devoted mother who sensed betrayal lurking in her own home. What began as a dream wedding in the suburbs ended in a nightmare of passion, betrayal, and blood. This is the chilling story of how a bride's forbidden affair with her groom's father led to a double murder on the wedding night. Anaya's story began years before the tragedy that would make headlines. She had come to Melbourne from India to pursue her master's degree in finance, full of hope and ambition. Her life had not been easy back home, and this opportunity meant everything to her. Determined to succeed, she quickly adapted to the new culture, balancing studies with part-time work. It was during one of her university projects that she met Ethan, a young man from a wealthy Australian family. He was warm, genuine, and instantly drawn to her intelligence and quiet confidence. What started as a friendship soon blossomed into something deeper, and within a year they were inseparable. Their romance appeared to outsiders like something out of a fairy tale. Ethan introduced Anaya to his parents, Richard and Margaret, who welcomed her with open arms. Margaret admired her traditional values, while Richard often praised her determination. Family gatherings became frequent, and Anaya was quickly woven into the fabric of their lives. The couple spent weekends traveling, attending cultural events, and sharing dreams of the future. Ethan's love was unwavering, and his family's acceptance made Anaya feel secure. When Ethan proposed at the seaside during a quiet sunset, Anaya said yes without hesitation. The engagement was celebrated lavishly, and the couple soon began preparing for their wedding. Plans for a grand celebration that combined Indian customs with Australian traditions were put into motion. Everyone who knew them spoke of how perfect they were together. Ethan's friends admired Anaya's grace, while her own circle back home gushed over the photos she shared online. To the outside world, everything looked flawless. Anaya had found love, stability, and a family that adored her. No one could imagine that beneath this shining image, a dangerous attraction was already taking root, one that would one day destroy everything. As the months passed, preparations for the wedding brought Anaya even closer to Ethan's family. She spent long evenings at their home, going over guest lists, decorations, and rituals that would merge two cultures into one grand event. Margaret was often busy with arrangements, and Ethan's work kept him occupied, leaving Richard and Anaya to spend more time together. At first, their conversations were light and harmless, stories about Richard's business travels, his younger years, and his pride in his family. But something shifted over time. Richard, in his early 50s, carried himself with confidence and charm, and his presence was hard to ignore. It began subtly, a lingering look across the room, a passing compliment that felt more intimate than it should have. Anaya, though engaged to Ethan, found herself drawn to Richard in ways that startled her. She told herself it was just harmless admiration, but the boundaries blurred quickly. Late-night discussions about wedding details became confessions about their lives, their regrets, and their desires. What should have been an innocent connection deepened into an unspoken understanding. The first time they crossed the line, it was impulsive and reckless. Both were overwhelmed with guilt afterward, but instead of ending it, they fell deeper into their secret. Richard felt alive again, intoxicated by the attention of a young woman who admired him. Anaya felt trapped between two men, one who gave her stability and devotion, and another who ignited something forbidden and dangerous inside her. They convinced themselves they could keep the affair hidden, that no one would ever know. Every stolen moment added fuel to the fire, making it impossible to stop. What they failed to see was that their secret wasn't just a private indulgence. It was a ticking bomb waiting to explode. As the wedding date drew closer, the cracks that had been hidden beneath the surface slowly began to show. Ethan, though excited and devoted, began noticing small things that unsettled him. He sometimes caught his father and Anaya exchanging glances that lingered longer than seemed normal. There were moments when Richard appeared unusually attentive to her, stepping in to help with the smallest of tasks, while Ethan himself was brushed aside. He dismissed these signs at first, telling himself that his father was only being supportive, but the thought never completely left his mind. Margaret, however, was far less willing to ignore what she saw. She noticed the tension that seemed to spark whenever Richard and Anaya were in the same room. She saw how Anaya's cheeks flushed when Richard's hand brushed against hers, and how quickly she looked away whenever Margaret caught her eye. Although no one spoke about it openly, a sense of unease began to spread. Margaret's suspicions grew sharper, and though she had no proof, she was convinced something was wrong. Family, friends, and relatives who visited for wedding planning also sensed something strange. Some whispered quietly after dinners, exchanging knowing looks when Richard paid Anaya too much attention. Still, no one dared confront the couple, afraid to ruin the upcoming celebration. It was easier to explain everything away as wedding stress and nerves, even if the truth was far more sinister. Anaya felt the weight of the unspoken suspicions pressing down on her. She smiled brightly in public, but inside she was consumed with dread. Richard, too, grew restless, torn between protecting his family's reputation and his dangerous attachment. The closer the wedding came, the more unstable everything became. A storm was gathering, and it was only a matter of time before it erupted. The day of the wedding arrived with all the grandeur that had been promised. The ceremony was a breathtaking fusion of cultures, with Anaya in a shimmering red and gold lehenga and Ethan in a crisp, tailored suit. Guests marveled at the blend of traditions, sacred vows under a canopy of flowers, followed by champagne toasts in a glittering reception hall. Cameras flashed, music played, and the air was filled with joy. To everyone present, it was the perfect beginning to a new chapter for the young couple. Anaya smiled for every photograph, her expression flawless, though inside, she carried a storm of guilt and fear. Richard played his role effortlessly, raising glasses in honor of his son and new daughter-in-law, shaking hands with guests, and laughing at every joke. Yet every time his eyes met Anaya's, there was a flicker of something more, a silent reminder of the secret that bound them together and threatened to unravel everything. Margaret, watching from the sidelines, could no longer ignore what she saw. Her suspicion had hardened into certainty, and the pain of betrayal sat heavy in her chest. As the evening wound down, the crowd of guests slowly dispersed, leaving only close family members and a few friends lingering. The newlyweds prepared to leave for their honeymoon, while Richard and Margaret insisted everyone share a quiet dinner before departing. The mood at the table was warm on the surface, filled with laughter and wine, but beneath it ran an undercurrent of tension that no one could fully hide. It was during this fragile calm that Margaret chose her moment. No longer willing to remain silent, she confronted the truth she had long suspected. Her words cut through the atmosphere like a blade, transforming a night of celebration into one of dread. The confrontation began with Margaret's trembling voice, heavy with anger and disbelief. She accused Richard and Anaya of betraying the family, her words sharp and unrelenting. The room seemed to shrink as the air grew thick with tension. Anaya froze, her heart pounding, while Richard tried to dismiss the claims. But Margaret's eyes burned with certainty. She had pieced together the stolen glances, the quiet disappearances, and the unnatural closeness between them. There was no more denying it. Richard's face darkened as his wife threatened to reveal everything. She spoke of the disgrace their family would endure, the shame it would bring to Ethan on the very night he had pledged his life to Anaya. Richard, who had spent his life building a respected reputation, felt the walls of his world closing in. Years of control and composure shattered in an instant, giving way to raw, uncontrolled rage. The argument escalated. Margaret's voice rose, echoing through the house, and Richard's temper snapped. In a sudden outburst, he lashed out violently, striking her with a force that ended her life before he could even comprehend what he had done. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret lay motionless, her accusations silenced forever. Anaya stood in shock, unable to process what she had just witnessed. Her secret affair had crossed into something irreversible, something drenched in blood. She wanted to scream, to run, yet she remained rooted to the spot. Richard, breathing heavily, stared at what he had done. For a brief moment, reality sank in. His wife was gone, and there was no way to undo it. When Ethan returned to the room moments later, Richard masked the horror with calm words, insisting Margaret had gone upstairs. But the truth was now a hidden corpse in the house, and it would not remain hidden for long. Ethan had been puzzled when his mother suddenly disappeared from the table. Though his father insisted she had gone upstairs to rest, a strange unease tugged at him. The wedding had been exhausting, But Margaret was not the type to slip away without a word. Hours later, as the house quieted and the last of the guests departed, Ethan's concern grew stronger. He excused himself from Anaya, who sat pale and silent, and began searching the house. The upstairs hallway was dimly lit, filled with the lingering scent of flowers from the wedding. Ethan checked each room until he reached the guest bedroom. When he pushed open the door, his world collapsed in an instant. His mother's lifeless body lay crumpled on the floor, hidden hastily behind the bed. The sight was unbearable, her once gentle face frozen in terror. Shock turned into horror, and then into fury. Ethan staggered back, struggling to breathe, before his father appeared in the doorway. Richard's expression was grim, his secret now exposed. Ethan demanded answers, his grief pouring out in broken cries, but Richard offered none. Instead, he moved toward his son, desperate to silence the one witness who could destroy him. A violent struggle erupted. Ethan fought with every ounce of strength, but Richard's desperation was stronger. Fueled by fear of exposure and the collapse of his carefully constructed life, Richard overpowered his own child. In a moment of sheer brutality, Ethan's fight ended, his future stolen by the very man who had raised him. Anaya watched from the shadows, frozen in terror. The man she had betrayed her fiancé with had now taken his life. The weight of guilt crushed her, yet she remained silent, complicit in the horror that had unfolded on what should have been her happiest night. Morning arrived, but the home that had echoed with laughter only hours before was now drenched in silence. Guests who had stayed overnight awoke to an unsettling stillness. The newlyweds were nowhere to be seen, and Margaret was absent from the breakfast table. Whispers began to spread as family members noticed the tension in the air and the strained expressions on Richard and Anaya's faces. When someone stumbled upon the guest room door left slightly ajar, the gruesome discovery shattered the fragile calm. Within minutes, panic consumed the household. The police were called, and what they uncovered was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. Margaret's lifeless body, Ethan's broken form, and the traces of violence told a story that defied belief. Investigators quickly pieced together the sequence of events, guided by evidence and the inconsistencies in Richard's account. Under pressure, the truth of the secret affair between Richard and Anaya emerged, exposing the twisted web that had led to the double murder. News of the scandal spread rapidly across Melbourne. Headlines painted the picture of a bride who had betrayed her groom with his own father, and a father who had destroyed his family in the name of secrecy and obsession. The public reacted with disbelief and outrage, unable to fathom how a wedding night could end in such unimaginable tragedy. Anaya, once admired as a radiant bride, was led away in handcuffs, her image forever stained. Richard, once respected as a patriarch, was condemned as a murderer who had killed his wife and son. The grand wedding that had promised joy became a tale of betrayal, violence, and ruin. It stood as a chilling reminder that beneath the surface of perfection, dark secrets can fester until they explode, leaving only devastation behind.